It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Pure Performance, episode 99. My name is Brian Wilson, and as always, Andy Grabner, my co-host. Andy, how are you doing today on our 99th episode?
I'm just shocked. 99. Look at that.
Yes.
Has it been that long? 99
It has
episodes.
been about 3 years. And if we think back to our first year, we had, we got lucky. We had some really, really cool guests in our first year. Gorenka Biedov, right? We had some guy named Gene Kim, right?
Gene who? Gene who?
Gene Kim. I'm not sure. It's someone. But anyway, we're coming back full circle, right? Because and I know I'm jumping right into it, but I'm just really excited to get to our guest. So sorry, before we jump into the guest, how are you doing, Andy?
I'm pretty good, and I'm just as excited as you, having actually Gene back on the call. So let's get straight to him, because I think there's nothing else I can say to make this more exciting. Gene, is it really you, the real Gene Kim?
Hey, great to be with you, Andy and Brian, and congratulations on episode 99.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hey, Gene, it's been, I think we talked about this prior. We met each other a couple of years ago at one of our Dynatrace conferences back in Orlando. So that must have been at least 3 years, I believe.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. In fact, I remember that. It was. I even remember the hallway we were in.
Wow.
In the track. That was awesome.
Yeah. And, we had you on a podcast. I think we actually back then recorded 3 podcasts because we had so much to talk about. And if people want to learn more about it, kind of re-listen to it, right? We'll probably put the links up there as well. Back then, it was all about the Phoenix project, and which was, I think, a game changer for the DevOps industry, or for organizations that wanted to transform and actually understand what DevOps really means from a cultural perspective, what organizations need to do to change, to get rid of waste. And now there's a new thing, right? What's the next big thing you're working on?
Well, for the last 3 years, I've been working on something called the Unicorn Project, and that's coming out on November 26th. What really motivated me to write is that this problem still remains. You could do everything described in the Phoenix Project, but studying the DevOps enterprise community, it's still so clear that there's at least 4 big problems I think that stand out. One is that there's all these invisible structures that are required for developers to be productive. And the problem is that they're invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, most organizations, they have decades of technical debt that, make, doing even simple things almost impossible. I think, two is, I think there's often very much a will to do DevOps, but I think it's not quite clear, what exactly we need from leadership. What behaviors do they need to model? What things do they do that help, and which things they do that hurt? I think I've also been fascinated by the fact that I think the DevOps movement was incredibly crucial for spotting that this problem of we can't get code to where it needs to go, right? In other words, we can't get it into production. And it turns out there's this other parallel universe that's almost exactly the same, but it has to do not with code, but data. Mm-hmm. So how do we get data into the hands of, the frontline developers, but it's often stuck in the systems of record, these data warehouses, and it takes 6 to 9 months to get data to where it needs to go, or to make schema changes, or to make data available. And so that was a real eye opener to me. And then I think fourth was this notion of this thing about digital disruption is on every board agenda, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's being in some ways weaponized and causing all sorts of strange things to happen. And so I actually do believe that, there's especially in retail, right? The retail apocalypse is, decimating certain parts of the economy. And I think that is, happening in every industry vertical. So just being able to connect the dots from like what do executives care about to the daily work of developers. I think those are the things that really I want to explore. In addition to functional programming. So yeah, those are sort of my aspirations around the Unicorn Project.
Yeah, and I think this book is really great because it walks through, again, it's presented like the Phoenix Project as a story, and it walks you through how these teams overcame all the challenges in front of them in order to implement this. And the reason I bring this up specifically is you mentioned the fact that everyone is aware of these things, but they're having trouble implementing them. And that's what I see all the time. So I deal with a lot of customers and prospects in my job. I shouldn't say deal with, I engage with. And
you get great delight and satisfaction out of.
Right. But and usually when we have a prospect, we're trying to sell our software into them. And, I'll ask them, where are you on, let's say, your pipeline and automation? And so many times, even now, years and years later, it's, oh yeah, we're really trying to get there, or we really want to get there, but we really haven't had a lot of time to put much effort into it, or we have part of the pipeline built, but it's still manual, because we fit into that stuff, but you still hear that the progress isn't as far as we would have thought. A lot of people know about it. A lot of people want to be there. But what I like about this book is it's really showing you some of the common things that you probably have taken from all the stories you've heard that people encounter and how to overcome them so that you actually do get to these places.
Yeah, in fact, I think I'm actually going through the audiobook, just spotting kind of mispronunciations, acronyms that were mispronounced, etc. I'm just having a lot of fun listening to it, and it just kind of reinforces for me that really this is a book about contrast, right? Maxine, our hero, right? She's looking around. She knows what great looks like. She embodies, creating great teams, great technical practices, and she's blamed for the payroll outage unfairly, right? Is thrown into the Phoenix Project as a 4-month punishment. That's terrible. But all around her, she sees people who can't get things done, right? They're not doing builds, right? The builds are always breaking. Mm-hmm. There's no automated testing, and so her job in the story is really to kind of recoil from this and to be horrified by it. She sees the merge. The 3-day merge process and is like physically sickened by it. I think the goal is really to try to convey, just how awesome and great feels like when you have right architectures, when you have right technical practices, when you have the right cultural norms, and just paint in vivid detail just how awful and sickening it is, like when you can't do it. So really, Maxine, she chooses as her mission, right, is to rescue developers, liberate them, so that they can, feel that sense of incredible joy that I think brought us into coding, right? That sense of incredible creativity and productivity, where we even lose sense of time or even sense of self, right? This is the
when you get into the flow, right? I mean, that's
flow, right? Yeah. So the second idea I'll call that focus, flow, and joy, and flow is really in that spirit of Dr. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, right, who wrote this amazing book called Flow and gave this amazing TED Talk that describes, that transcendent state we achieve when we do the things we love, without impediments and obstacles and hardship.
Right. Mm-hmm. The other thing I wanted to mention too with this is, ourselves at Dynatrace, we had the luxury and the good fortune of having an endorsement from the top down to do this journey ourselves, right? So at contrasting with the book, where there's the Rebel Alliance in the book who are kind of subversively trying to do this, if some people are lucky and they work in an organization where maybe CTO or someone very high up says, we need to make this change. We understand that we're not going to survive if we don't go through this transformation, and it's all hands on deck. They get full support. But I think what is probably, and you can maybe tell me what you see, what's more common is you might not always have that support. So the book almost can be used as a loose blueprint of how to go the DIY route, maybe, and start your own little Rebel Alliance, and how to, pick something small, get a team of people you really think can work on this stuff, and start small and try to prove out some of these things, and then you'll pull in more allies as you go along. And that's another thing that I really liked about it, because it's, not everybody has the luxury of full-on support in the beginning.
Yeah, right. It's a great point. And by the way, Andy, this is what I remember so vividly from our conversation is your description of this was our transformation was driven from the top, from the beginning, the flagship product. And that really made an impression on me. And in the Unicorn Project, it's been my observation studying the DevOps enterprise community. This is a community that I've just gotten so much delight, and it's been an honor to study for the last 5 years. Seeing how these things are being incorporated in large, complex organizations where you don't have that top-down support. Really, you have this incredibly courageous leader who's, in many cases, putting themselves into incredible personal jeopardy, trying to push the organization to where they have, moral conviction that, where they need to go.
Yeah.
They're hiding capacity. They're doing things on the side. They're kind of, as you put, kind of like putting together this loose coalition and alliances, really so that they can show a success and then build a bit and show it. Right. This is not a belief. This is something we built, and that's what drives a more business case and allows the more conservative, more risk averse people to eventually get on board. And so that this community has really inspired the Unicorn Project, and it's. So in the book, Maxine couldn't do it alone, right? It's like in the movie Robinson Crusoe or the movie Lost, with the person, she's like stranded on this island, right, supported by nobody, and is approached by this mysterious, group of people who recruit her into the Rebel Alliance. And so it's really Maxine in partnership with Kurt, this kind of savvy leader who just knows kind of how to bend the rules and stay underneath the radar screen, that really allows them to take all of Maxine's ideas of like how things should be done and really bring them into reality, take advantage of opportunities to show that this is a better way of working. So to your point, one of my hopes with the book is that people have internal book clubs like they do with the Phoenix Project, and be able to say, is our leadership more like Kurt, who's really kind of has the best long-term interest of the organization at heart, or is it like Chris, the VP of R&D, who is actually kind of a very weak character, right? Who is wants things kind of the way they are and is almost afraid of change. So I'm hoping that might bring up some interesting and maybe courageous conversations. Does that resonate with you, Brian?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's always the question. And I think too, when you have the people like Kurt, or when you have the people like Chris, Sarah, Shannon, Cranky Dave. I love Cranky Dave's nickname, but these are all characters. If you've been working in anywhere in IT for probably even a year, or maybe even 6 months, you can identify them in your organization. You know exactly who's who. So they're very archetypal characters, and I don't just even mean. Oh, Brent, of course.
Brent's
yes,
back, right?
Yes, Brent, well, of course, Brent's back. Yeah, but and I don't even mean in like the archetypal Star Wars way. I mean archetypal even in just in the IT world, right? So you can point to every single person in your organization who are these characters. So I think it is critical, as you say, to have those conversations and identify who's who, so that you know where to go, maybe where to sneak past. Keep your head down, which Maxine didn't do a very good job at doing. Right?
It's one of the things I learned doing the Unicorn Project is there's a famous Tom Cotter who wrote the seminal book on organizational change, right? The burning platform, right? That came from Cotter, but he also wrote a book called Accelerate. He talks about what he calls the second operating system. The first operating system is the official hierarchy, is the org chart. Mm-hmm. And he suggests that, to really get great things done, to act faster, get better decisions, you really need the second operating system that you overlay on top of that, which is all about relationships. And it's these informal networks that you create to get things done. And I think really that rebellion in the Unicorn Project is meant to embody that, right? Find the other greatest engineers in the company who all are supremely dissatisfied with status quo. And, as they state, their mission is to overthrow the ancient powerful order because they know there's a better way to work. Mm-hmm. And so, I think there's a lot of literature to suggest that, these are the way that we create new, better ways of working that are better, safer, happier.
Hey, Gene. So now looking back, I mean, you've been, as you said, in the enterprise DevOps community for that many years. I think you're hosting at least 2 DevOps enterprise summits every year. Or is it even more? Is it 2 or 3?
Yeah, it is. We have one in Las Vegas that's coming up next week, and that's end of October, and then we have one in London that's around June. And so what's great about that is that it gives us opportunity to study organizations that are really global, and I would say it's really the largest brands across every industry vertical. And and what they all have in common is they have hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of developers, just like Google had, not so long ago. So it just shows that every company is becoming a software company, and they need to be adopting DevOps principles and practices.
Yeah. So if you think back, right, I'm pretty sure people always ask you, so Gene, what's your definition of DevOps? What does it really mean? I would assume that definition also has changed over the years, or has it not? Or has it expanded? Has it evolved? So my question to you would be, if somebody approaches you, and I'm sure they do all the time, what was the answer maybe a couple of years ago when you started on that mission, and how has it changed, and how do you now explain what DevOps really means, and how they can get, and what it means for an organization?
Yeah, great question. So in the DevOps handbook that came out in 2016, we came up with this. Here's a definition I'd love. It's the architectural, technical practices, and cultural norms that allow organizations to deliver applications and services quickly and safely, which allows experimentation and innovation, allows the fastest delivery of value to our customers, while ensuring world-class reliability, security, and stability, so that we can win in the marketplace or even survive in the marketplace. So I like that because it doesn't actually say what DevOps is, right? It says what the outcomes are, which I love. But I actually love this definition more now, which actually came from John Smart, who for so many years, he was the head of ways of working at Barclays. And he said, it's better value, sooner, safer, happier. It's so great. And I think in the Phoenix project, we use the instruments of the 3 ways and the 4 types of work to kind of explore how does it impact our daily work. And in the Unicorn project, I use the instrument of the 5 ideals to really just show, in my mind, kind of experientially what is required to create greatness. And so the first ideal is locality and simplicity. So the opposite of technical debt. The second ideal is focus, flow, and joy, right? That feeling of fun that we're talking about versus toil. The third ideal is improvement of daily work. So like the and-on chord, we have to prioritize improvement of daily work, even over daily work itself. The fourth ideal is psychological safety. So the opposite of the desolation and the cultural tones that the Phoenix Project are creating, where people are getting fired left and right for failures. And the fifth ideal is customer focus, right? Really putting the kind of this unflinching search at like what things do our customers really value that they are willing to pay for, which create lasting, durable business advantage versus things that are only of importance to our functional silos. So those are things that I meant to explore, kind of these other dimensions of, DevOps before and after.
First of all, thanks for that answer. The question that I have to admit to the audience now, to the world, that you sent us the parts to read the book, and I only made it right now as of the time of the recording to half of part 2, so I don't know all of it.
But I do want to mention that I finished it, but I'm not. But I'm also not. I get the points. Yeah. I'm also not running around.
Andy, you're on vacation. Yes. It's,
and Andy,
no problem.
Andy runs around like a maniac. I sit at my desk all day.
No, but I have a question for you, because when we talk with our customers, and they also they like to hear our story, and then what we are now basically promoting and pushing to them is what we call autonomous cloud management, or autonomous cloud enablement, which means we want to help them how their organizations can use cloud technology so that they can enable their development teams to become more autonomous when using that technology, right? So, but I think, we have kind of a prescriptive blueprint on how to get there. But now, kind of circling back what I read in the first part of your book, where Maxine is really struggling with getting the development environment up and running, right? And actually getting access to it. Is this, from my perspective, and I think this is what kind of people, what I answer them, I think you need to have something like a developer productivity team or something in your organization to get started with, right? Where you basically provide development self-service models. Like you basically need to deliver to your developer an app, a mobile app-like experience to get started with the task. So on my mobile phone, I can download an app that does a certain job pretty well. And so I think as an organization, I need to provide the same app-like experience, a great user experience to my developers as well, so that they are not slowed down by figuring out how these things work in this company, but just getting started. So basically, I don't know, development environment as a self-service or I don't know what you call it, but so I will be interested.
Everything as a service.
Everything is a service, right? I mean, that's what it is.
Yeah. In fact, one of my favorite lines in the book comes from Eric, right? Who we know from the Phoenix Project. He says, in the tech giants, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, right? They put their best engineers on developer productivity, right? They have, I think Google has over 1,000 developers on dev productivity. By their numbers, that's $1 billion a year. Right? Microsoft probably has 3,000 developers on dev productivity. Whereas in most organizations, the people who they put on dev productivity and builds and CI/CD and telemetry platforms, are the summer interns, or the developers not good enough to work on features. And so I think that's just an amazing contrast of the contrast of how highly the tech giants prioritize it versus how much in traditional organizations they don't value it. And it is no doubt in my mind that developer productivity is one of the most important priorities for any organization. In fact, Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, he said, if a developer ever has to choose between a feature or improving dev productivity, choose dev productivity because we will reap the benefits for forever. Yeah. So I think that's I can't be overstated. In fact, Eric also talks about this amazing story of Nokia, right? The chairman of Nokia, when he realized in 2010 that the Symbian OS build times were 2 days, that there was no hope of catching up with Apple, right? They switched to Windows Mobile because he said if a developer it takes 2 days for a developer to learn whether their change worked or would have to be redone, then all our hopes on near-term profitability and long-term viability is a mirage. It was an illusion, right? And so I just, for the chairman of a company to be able to say that, I mean, it just shows that this is something I think in 10, 20 years, every business leader will also be able to do. But in the meantime, it's really up to us to be able to convey how important dev productivity is.
I think it's funny because that was one of the notes I had put, was that one about the people at the top and the bottom. So I'm glad you brought that one up for me. But I think that also goes to address, right, if we think about, the title of the book, The Unicorn Project, right? Everyone looks at the Googles and the Facebooks and all these as unicorns, but then you even beautifully mentioned in the book that a unicorn is just a horse with a horn on it, right? So you have all these horses that you can turn into a unicorn by sticking a horn on it, right? But and you address it in the book where, developers can't get anything done. You have all these developers sitting around who can't even build an environment. But at these, the quote unquote unicorns, in the first day or the first hour, even sometimes, you're supposed to deploy code, which you can't do unless you can't just spin up your own environment. But I think the idea, right? The idea, what you're saying though with all this is like, you don't have to be Google, you don't have to be Facebook to be able to give the developer, to enable them, as Andy's saying with the developer enablement team or whatever, to enable your developers to come in, spin up an environment and try something. Right, that's not a unicorn idea. Which is the title is almost. The title of the book, the title of the team is almost a misnomer, right? Because the whole idea is you don't have to be one of these unicorns to do this.
Right. And by the way, when I'm laughing, it's not because it's funny; it's because it's sad and tragic, and all we can do is laugh. I mean, it's maddening, right? But so it's 2011, 2012, and one of my biggest aha moments, right? It was when I got to spend a day at Etsy. And this is when John Allspaw was, maybe it was 2013. And I got to watch a deploy. And it was just amazing, right? The fact that every new engineer at Etsy will do a deploy by the end of their first day. And so, they're only pushing their picture, to the site, but still, it's a deploy. There's blogs about their board members doing deploys. It even says even dogs do deploys. At Facebook, you go through a boot camp and you're doing a deploy within the first couple of days. And in most organizations, some of these applications, they're so complex. They're so tightly coupled to everything. You can't do a deploy. I mean, you can't even get. The only place it will run is an integrated test environment, which there's never enough of. They're never cleaned up. I mean, it's just it's one of those things that some things are just so obvious when you put them in contrast next to each other.
Yeah.
And to your point, Brian, I think your point is right on. Maxine's saying that they are taking the same DevOps and principles and patterns that were pioneered by the tech giants, but must be adopted by every technology organization. And it's not that what is it? It's not that small. It's not that small beats big. It's fast beats slow.
Right.
So big and fast, we'll decimate big and slow and small and and small, right? So I think that's what's so exciting about the quote enterprise is that it's like the sleeping giant awakening. Once they fully embrace these new modes of production, new modes of thinking that were pioneered by the tech giants, the economic value they'll create will eclipse that was been created already by the tech giants. And I know that's trillions of dollars, but that is, in my mind, it is obvious that when you take those same practices, put them in the organizations of which 98% of developers reside, make them as productive as if they were at a unicorn, a tech giant, that will create trillions of dollars of economic value per year. It's fast beats slow, and big and fast will decimate everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Gene, coming to the responsibilities of a dev productivity team, what you've seen out there, can you give the audience that may, now realize, hey, we work in a company, we don't even have a dev productivity team, or we have one and we only see the interns there. Can you quickly and I'm not, I don't want to say interns are bad, right? But basically coming back to your argument earlier, can you roughly explain what you have seen in the organizations you work with, what a dev productivity responsibilities are, and also what type of people they have in there? I'm especially interested in, is this just the tools? Is it also them giving architectural, let's say, are they giving help on architecture? Because obviously you need to have the right architecture for your apps in order, for instance, to bring build times down and things like that. So what's the scope of a dev productivity team, and what kind of people do you see being part of that team in organizations that are successful with?
Yeah, I kind of have a very broad view of it. Is like, I think platform teams probably fit into that. The kind of the SRE competencies might be coming from here. But yeah, I think the broadest goal is like help developers use their best energies to solve the business problems at hand, right? And not have to deal with infrastructure, things that they shouldn't need to know. They shouldn't all be experts in telemetry. They shouldn't all be experts in security. They shouldn't all be experts in operating systems. So the goal is to embody that knowledge into platforms that developers can use and quickly inherit the best known ways to solve problems, so they can use their best energies to solve the most important business problems, as opposed to solving puzzles all day and Googling things Googling things and Stack Overflowing things. And so things that obviously in my mind fit in there is like environment creation, right? Everyone should be able to get a production-like environment and be able to run on a laptop or run it in a cluster somewhere or run it in the cloud. They should be able to have some opinionated patterns they can use for deployment and architecture, right? Like the 12-factor app pattern or container, Kubernetes, whatever, right? God help us if they all have to learn Kubernetes, right? It's just so hard, right? Telemetry, right? It's like, we want someone to say, here's how we do logging in production, and here's how we do metrics, and we'll give you these APIs. You can just use them, and they'll just show up, in a way that you want, so that developers aren't having to learn about cardinality rules and which ones will break the telemetry cluster, right? So these are things that these are things that we want to liberate developers from, and this is no doubt in my mind, right, that there's so much value, and so these dev productivity teams, they're also probably responsible for onboarding, new teams into any of these platforms. Like, do you want to use Kubernetes or Mesos or whatever, right? Hey, we'll support these, but not these. And if you really want to go it alone, you can. But that's kind of like not on the menu, so you're really on your own. But I think there's a tremendous value in being able to provide that for developers. I would put databases in there too, right? God knows, despite 30 years of experience, I still can't write fast database queries, and I probably have too many indexes, and my queries are still slow, right? So like having help on that. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, not completely, and I think that's also what we are seeing. And I guess you're right. I mean, there's a lot of different roles that kind of fit in, and you mentioned some of them in the beginning: the platform teams, the SRE teams, the performance engineers. There's a lot of different roles, but in the end, I like what you said. In the end, and if I kind of get this, you want to provide a self-service model where developers can really focus on what they need to do, which is using, and I like this, the best energy to solve business problems and not having to think about every other problem, because it's been fully automated into the platform, into the tools that they use. And the dev productivity team is also there to onboard them, or to onboard new platforms, but also onboard these teams and enabling them to actually use these platforms in a and I call it, as what I said earlier, in an app-like experience. Like I just want to download a new app. Hey, I want to deploy an app on Kubernetes. So actually, I don't care if it's Kubernetes. I want to deploy it in a two-stage pipeline, and I don't want to write YAML files. Right? I mean, that's and I really like that, because now a little bit of the stuff that we are doing, we've been also focusing on how can we make, for instance, monitoring available as a self-service. So we always say we have a lot of data, but the most important thing is how can we get easily the right data to the right people or tools at the right time to make the right next decision without them having to learn how does this monitoring tool, in our case, Dynatrace, work. The data has to be easily available either through a Slack bot or an integration with Jira because they're using Jira or whatever else they're using, right? I mean, that's one thing. And the other thing that I want to say, I really like, you used the word opinionated. I think you said opinionated delivery. And I like that too, because currently we're working on an open source project called Captain. And Captain has also, it's an event-driven but very opinionated operator or orchestrator that is basically doing continuous delivery and automated operations for cloud-native applications. But I like that you use the word opinionated, because that's also the way I explain it. Captain has an opinion about how cloud-native applications should be deployed, tested, evaluated, and promoted. And that's what we're doing. And I think that's why I like the validation a little bit, at least. Yeah.
I love it. And just like, what is the contrast, right? I mean, when I'm Googling for something about how to build a Kubernetes, whatever, I don't have an opinion, right? My opinion is whatever is the first answer I find on Stack Overflow, right? I'm not that good at it. I don't deserve to have an opinion. So like to have a strongly opinionated way of like, here's kind of what experienced people say is the best way we're going to do things, or here's some choices. I think it is great. And I love the idea of like solving business problems versus solving puzzles. For me, in my not so recent past, I was trying to figure out how to escape spaces and file names inside of Makefiles. And I couldn't figure it out. Like after a day, and this, a buddy told me, "Oh, that's the $$ in Makefiles," and I got really, really angry because I knew that 30 years ago, and now I resent it. It's like I don't care. I don't want to deal with that stuff anymore, right? Mm-hmm. So there's certain things that I value in terms of learning, and there's other types of things like $$ Makefiles that have really no value to me whatsoever, right? It's like I'll learn it and then I'll throw it away because it has no long-term I don't want to use up space in my brain for stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. I think this all ties into, Andy, if you go back to when we spoke briefly with Josh McKenty at the end of Perform a few years ago, and we were asking him, what his thoughts on, I think we asked about, Internet 3.0, because I think we're in 2.0 at this point, but he jumped ahead to 4.0. And the whole idea was, I want an internet where I don't even have to be aware of the internet, and that always tied back to me the idea of, to put that into contrast, thinking about going online even right now. We open our laptops and we're online versus, 15, 20 years ago, you had to pull up your modem software, disable your call waiting, make your connection, sit through it, and then you have your slow connection. And with this whole idea of like, now it's just there and I don't really have to think about my connection unless I have to put in a password for a new, hotspot. Same thing with the developer ideas. Like the developer shouldn't have to think about any of the other stuff. All they should really have to concentrate on is pushing their code. Right. And
solving the business problem.
Right. If they're spending any time on things outside of that, it's not set up right for them, at least as ideally as it could be.
Right.
And I think that's where it needs to be. Like the developer should just walk in, plop down, here's my code, and push it out. Right.
Yeah. And maybe just to resonate with that, Brian.
Yeah.
So I wrote this blog post, my love letter to Clojure. This is the hardest thing I've ever learned. It's a functional programming language. It's a Lisp. And functional programming is, for me, it's made like 95% of my errors just disappear. I mean, it's kind of an astonishing claim, but I wrote 9,000 words on trying to substantiate why I believe that. And, it's because it takes away certain things that are just very dangerous, like your ability to change variables, right? They're immutable. It forces a kind of discipline around side effects, right? All input outputs happen at the beginning and end, and everything in the middle is pure functions. And I just love the purity and beauty of that. And kind of one of the weird things that I've now self-identified as a developer. So, for 20 years, I self-identified as an ops person, despite getting my graduate degree in compiler design, because I just loved operations and infrastructure. But now, like 3 years ago, it sort of flipped. I just love coding and just how much you can get done and like being able to build all these things. And kind of this weird side effect is that I really detest infrastructure now. And it's not that I don't value it. It's just that I'm terrible at it. I told my Makefile story, right? I don't want to do Kubernetes deployment files. I don't want to like me writing a Kubernetes YAML file is like a disaster. I'm terrible at databases. I just want to be in my little universe. And I think, maybe I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but I really do believe that, if you can, I would love to be surrounded by world-class infrastructure people who just have done all the work for me and do exactly like you said. I don't have to solve puzzles these days, right? I just use what they wrote, build the platforms they built, and suddenly, like my database queries and storage, it works, right? My deployments work. My telemetry shows up in a way that not only works, but could be leveraged by the rest of the organization and feed into data warehouses and like dashboard. I mean, those are amazing things, right? And I think it really affords a specialization that is very good, right? It allows us to solve business problems and leverage expertise in a way that we just couldn't do before, right? Before we'd have to have meetings and open up tickets and have people do work for us. Andy, you were saying the self-service platform. It does that. I think that dynamic is so great because now anyone who uses the platform is genuinely using the best known methods of how we think we should be solving problems. And it's, I think it's magical for the developer. And it means that there's a developer saying thank you to all these people.
Yeah.
Hey, Gene, looking back, so it was the Phoenix project. Now it's the Unicorn project. What's next?
Oh, I have no idea. My planning horizon these days is like measured in minutes, maybe hours. I must say there is something that really riveted me, and that was the Nokia story, right? The story told by Risto Salasma, the chairman of Nokia. And when I first heard about it, my first reaction was, what can we possibly learn from a board member who oversaw the 95% destruction of the market cap of Nokia? But it was just a really astonishing book, right? That line of, how at the highest level of the company, right, he knew that 48-hour build times was basically a death knell for them. And, Windows Mobile didn't work out so great, but, it was a calculated bet. It was like, we're not going to get there through Symbian OS, right? So it was just an astonishing book. And I think I would just love to explore further that, I think we all have this common narrative of why did Apple beat Nokia or why did Google beat Yahoo in the display ad and the search space? And, it's all because, they typically sound like, oh, because Apple was so smart and Google was so smart. They had the best people. They had the best technology. And I think there's a narrative that says, you know what? Nokia also had really great people, and Yahoo also had great people. In fact, Hadoop was built at Yahoo. I think the answer of like why they were beaten has a lot more to do with architecture, technical platforms, how they prioritize infrastructure, how they made or didn't enable developers to be productive. And I would just love to explore that more fully. I don't know what to do with it yet, but that's something that I've been interested in for years. And working on the Unicorn project only makes me even more interested, because this is not just a technology concern. This is a business concern, right? This is not technical debt. It's like complexity debt, business debt. I mean, there's nothing technical about it. This is a choice made by all leaders. So that's something I think kind of when I look ahead, that's where I'd love to be spending more time educating myself on.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I mean, again, I didn't read all the stories, but I would assume that the one that is being more flexible, that actually coming to your point of the data, right? That one that can actually react on data faster and then being flexible enough to change if they see basically that something is not going in the right direction. But if you're inflexible, if it takes you 2 days to build, then obviously you are not very agile, and you cannot change as fast as you need in order to avoid a big mistake. I think that's...
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a part of it. And I think the 5 ideals really came from being able to try to even more concretize that. Like, one is, to really react in the marketplace, you have to be able to make changes quickly and deploy them. And it can't be scattered across 35 different teams. And that requires an architecture. Second ideal is focus, flow, and joy, right? You have to have employee engagement. You have to have people happy doing their work. Third ideal is improvement of daily work. Are we really prioritizing improvement? Especially when it comes to technical debt reduction, right? Are we prioritizing architecture and dev productivity in the way that we should be? Psychological safety. Google spent years studying what made great teams great in their Project Rework, Project Oxygen, and psychological safety was always at the top of what teams reported as being the most important. And they defined it as, to what extent do members on a team feel free to share what they think, say what they, to express ideas without fear of castigation or blame or ridicule. The fifth idea is customer focus. I think the answer kind of lies in there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, I wanna throw a quote out at you, and I want to get your opinion. So this quote now comes actually from Anita Engleder. She actually was leading the initial transformation, or part of that team. That was actually the initial DevOps team, what we would now, maybe call a platform team. And she had a quote earlier this year, because we asked her about, her thoughts on when we talk with customers about they have to have these many environments and automated pipelines and automated testing. And then she made a comment, and she said for her, the maturity of a company is indirect proportional to the number of environments that lead up to production.
That's great. I love that.
Okay. And so the idea, the result, basically, if you do the math, that means if you only have production, you are the most mature company, because because you don't need anything else. And then people sometimes probably say, well, how is it possible? Because you obviously have modern deployment models where you can do canaries, or you can deploy through feature flags. But I wanted to throw it out at you and see what your reaction is.
Yeah, I love that quote, because right in the most, I would say in the kind of the most dangerous environments, you have no testing environment, no staging environment, no place safe to make changes. So that means like you're making all your mistakes in production, right? No integration environment. I think so. As you get better, right, you have lots of integration test environments, and that's good, right? And those are often not valued, so that definitely resonates with me. But if you look at how these world-class organizations work, I mean, one talk that really blew me away was Spotify. He said, we were getting good enough. This was a dev manager at DockerCon 2014. He said, we were catching all the errors we could catch in unit testing, but now the errors are really happening between the components. So that means we need an integration environment. And so that's when they made the decision to basically have every developer not just write and run their unit tests on their laptop. They said, we need to write and run integration tests on our laptop. And that's when they created basically kind of this mini Spotify environment inside of Docker that has every component in it that developers are expected to run every test in. And it just shows how much you can shift left on that. And to do that, right, you end up with orders of magnitudes more pre-production environments than production environments. Instead of just one pre-production environment, you have hundreds or maybe even thousands. So that quote definitely resonates with me, and I think it's just another great difference between like what great organizations do and what not so great organizations do.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, what else, Gene? Is there anything else? If you, what kind of to wrap it up or kind of come to the end? But if somebody asks you, what is the biggest takeaway from the last couple of years that you spent, in writing the book and interviewing companies, what is the top thing that people need to do, or organizations need to do? The biggest takeaway. What's the
I think it is this importance of dev productivity, right? Everyone sees features, and so that's the ones that get funding, right? My app, my feature, my API, right? There's this underneath that are all the systems of record, the APIs below that, and so forth, right? Those are tougher to get funding for, but in general, no one is funding these dev productivity teams, these platform teams, and I think that is actually one of the most important. And I'm hoping the Unicorn Project does sort of help people see why it's so important and enables conversations within the organization. And I generally hope that people can use that to confront some issues, whether it's dev productivity or psychological safety or what do we want from our leadership. And I'm hoping that causes some productive conversation, maybe even uncomfortable. And I think it really does suggest that people's intuitions of what is needed is absolutely right. And I'm hoping that they can use a book as ammo to help really kind of push that agenda forward.
Andy, did you want to go ahead then and summarize? I know you've got a train to catch.
Don't miss the train.
Don't miss the train. Yeah. Well, the thing is, it is really challenging for me to summarize all the stuff that Gene actually, all the stuff that we talked about.
I think there's a book that summarizes it.
I know. I just wanted to say, I think the best summary is, read the book. We'll make sure to put links out there on the conference proceedings so people can find it. But I think it's very easy to find. But for me, the biggest thing that I've a couple of notes that I made to myself is when I asked you about how have you defined DevOps and how would you define it now? I think there's a little evolved over the years, but I think you said John Smart gave a quote saying better value, sooner, safer, and happier. I think that's a great way. And in the end, it really comes down to making sure that the people that actually create the value for the business, which are the developers, can use their best energy to actually solve these business problems and not puzzles in the fast, most efficient way. And therefore, organizations need to put the right people into the dev productivity teams, because this is a multiplier. If you put the right people there, you're building systems that enable developers to become self-serviced in standing up the environments, pushing code through an opinionated library or opinionated delivery pipeline, not having to deal and care and learn about how many $signs do I need to escape, how does this YAML work. And I think this has to be just part of it. So I think developer productivity is key, and I cannot agree more with it. And I also one thing that I take home, two things I take home for me as a homework. A, I obviously want to finish the book. And B, I'm also very interested in that Nokia story, what we can learn from that. So.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And the one thing I wanted to mention, the only other quote that I had highlighted, now there was a ton of stuff in here that I wanted to highlight, but I really wanted to resist the temptation to highlight the entire book. So I only there was two things. The one we mentioned before, but the other one that really, really struck me was right before they sent out the emails on Black Friday. Maxine says, "We still have so much to learn before we're experts at this." And then to me, that's one of the keys in all of this, is that you're going to learn, you're going to start doing things, but there's always going to just be so much more to tackle. And this concept, I think, the 5 ideals, they're all very, very important, right? You can't get through all this without maybe all 5 of them. But if I were to force to pick one of the most important ones, I would almost say the fourth ideal, psychological safety, to me, I believe is one of the most important ones, because you have to have the ability to make mistakes. You have to have the ability to learn from the mistakes, to make errors, and then build better pipelines, better automation, better everything around those mistakes so that they're not made in the future and that everyone's enabled without placing blame on everybody. Right. I mean, and we had that in our own system where Bernd, our CTO, said, yeah, I know you're going to take down production. That's going to happen. I'll cover for you. Make sure whenever those things happen, you build a resilient system that takes care of that, and you try to predict all the different things. You use chaos engineering to figure out what could go wrong. How do we build more resilient apps? But the idea is, yeah, it's not going to come overnight. You're going to be learning so much over and over and over again. And it's a work in progress almost always, until you get to some really elevated state. But, every once in a while we just see, I think Azure just this week had issues with their, what do you call that? Their VPN access, right? We couldn't log into VPN. Everyone's still making mistakes, right? So it's okay. Anyway, that's what really struck with me. Anyway, I love the book, Gene. Thank you for writing it. I think it's a great learning tool. And again, in story format, it makes it so much more enjoyable to learn this kind of stuff.
No, thank you so much. In fact, we are making excerpts. I think it's 60% of the book available for free, and so those are all available for download. And those are in a week or two, we're going to have the audiobook excerpts available as well. Cool. And so those are all available for everyone to enjoy. And I hope everyone does enjoy it. And I would love to get any feedback on what you all think.
And is Mark Hamill doing the audiobook?
Actually, that was really fun to interview. Listen to the audition tapes. It was really kind of very fun to sort of pick one and kind of give some extra stage direction of that was something I've never really done like that before. So that was great.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. Anybody wants to reach out to Gene or follow you, you're just at Gene Kim, or were you able to?
Gene K at itrevolution.com and on Twitter, Real Gene Kim. Okay,
Real Gene Kim. And if you have any questions or comments for us, you can send them to pure_DT on Twitter, or send an email to pureperformance@dynatrace.com. Thank you, Gene. Andy, as always, thanks for doing this with me. We'll see everyone back for episode 100 next time.
Thank you so much, and congratulations again on hitting 99.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.